Inú mi dùn láti sọ pé ọ̀jọ̀gbọ́n Taofeek Adébáyọ̀ wọ́n ti darapọ̀ mọ́ wa láti California báyìí. So àjẹ́ kan sinmi díẹ̀ ká tó gbọ́ ọ̀rọ̀ lẹ́nu wọn. Ọ̀jọ̀gbọ́n Taofeek, ẹ káàbọ̀ sórí ètò yìí.
Ẹ káàsán, ẹ káàárọ̀, ẹ
Ẹ ṣeun.
káàsán, ẹ
Okay,
ṣeun sir. Yeah.
you're welcome. So ká máa bá ètò wa lọ. We go to all the way to California. Dr. Taofeek Adébáyọ̀. Before you speak, we will introduce you first. Okay? Thank you. Dr. Taofeek Adébáyọ̀ is an assistant professor of linguistics in the English department of California State University, San Bernardino. Before joining CSUSB, Dr. Adébáyọ̀ was a Fulbright Fellow at New York University and a Fellow of the Andrew Mellon Fellowship in Community Engaged Scholarship at Tulane University, where he got his PhD in linguistics. His research primarily engages with the literature on the globalization of English and examines English-induced changes in the languages of West Africa and how the resulting changes and variations are constrained by social and geographical factors. He also explores how this phenomenon can shed light on issues of theoretical interest in syntax and phonology. Dr. Adébáyọ̀ has an ongoing community engaged project called Science in Yoruba that seeks to make general STEM knowledge available in the Yoruba language. The project translated a basic science textbook into Yoruba and taught it at 3 schools in Nigeria between 2017 and 2019. The project currently posts explainer STEM videos in Yoruba on social media platforms like Facebook, where it has more than 274,000 followers, and TikTok, where it currently has about 94,000 followers. That in brief is the bio about Dr. Taofeek Adébáyọ̀, who is going to speak next. So I'm going to ask Dr. Adébáyọ̀ to please proceed. Thank you very much. You can unmute yourself, please. All right. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Ẹ ṣeun gan, mo dúpẹ́. So I understand that there may be some people here who probably do not speak Yoruba. That is the information I have. And so I have prepared this talk in English. But at some point, I may use some Yoruba. Okay, so the title of this presentation is a community-engaged approach to actualizing mother tongue education.
Okay.
And the structure of the talk basically is that I would do some introduction where I would identify some problems that, based on my own experience, I have recognized. And I would go ahead and talk about way forward by proposing or rather describing a community-engaged approach to this problem. So, and then I would go ahead and talk about why is this approach important? Why do we need to take it serious? And I will conclude by providing a summary of everything that I have. But just to make sure, I want to know, can you see my screen? Okay, all right, thank you. So the first thing I wanted to do is to identify some problems. And I know that this is not an exhaustive list. I know that the problems that we have with the implementation of mother tongue education in Nigeria and, in fact, across Africa are many, but I just want to focus on the ones that I think I can offer some suggestions on. So the first one is lack of policy implementation. We all know that in documents, we have the policy saying that in this so class, you should use mother tongue to teach the kids. But of course, we know that research and experience have shown that what we have in writing doesn't actually come close to what we have in practice. So another problem is lack of infrastructure. And what I mean by this is actually twofold. So there is the lack of instructional materials. That's one problem. It's a major problem. And there is another one, which is lack of private catalytic pedagogical practices. So these two will be my focus in this talk. I know that there is another problem, which is the problem of insufficient advocacy, and maybe another one, the problem, I mean, the lack of sufficient conversations about this. I want to especially thank Professor Osinawa for facilitating this, but I'm saying that it's also part of the problem. We need to have more of these conversations moving forward. So those two problems, I have a diagram here showing what the problems are, which is lack of policy implementation and then lack of infrastructure. So these two problems are definitely interconnected. Interconnected because if we don't have lack of policy implementation, then we don't have lack of infrastructure. But because the government as I don't want to say failed, but yeah, maybe somewhat failed to implement its policy, and because of that, we have this domino effect that we don't have the infrastructure that we need in order to carry out mother tongue education. And so the question then is, who is responsible for this? I know that in most cases we say that both of these problems is actually the responsibility of the government, and that is true. But what I wanted to point our attention to is that although lack of implementation is squarely government's problem, lack of infrastructure it's not solely the government of the problem of our government. So private citizens like you and I also share in the responsibility. It may not be immediately clear, but in fact, societies change, societies progress because of what the citizens are doing. And so I am saying that the responsibility to have the appropriate infrastructure, meaning the instructional materials, the enabling practices that can steer the government towards, a full-scale implementation of mother tongue education. By the way, I wanted to apologize if I'm a little bit slow. It's actually 4 a.m., around 4 a.m. here. I'm supposed to be sleeping, but yeah. So that is that we all also share in the responsibility. So what are the existing solutions to the problems of mother tongue education? Existing solutions include things like lobbying the government. Professor Kolawolabi has been really hard working on this, and I want to thank him for all the work that he has been doing with Seolink in order to lobby the government. I am particularly aware of his work with the Lagos state government, the Osun state government, and all of the activities that Seolink has been engaging in. So, and then we also have awareness campaign like the one that we are currently doing. So thanks to Professor Osinawa for making this a reality. So we also have this ongoing. It's not the only one, activities of, A-Steel, Dr. Fakinlede's A-Steel, Professor Kolawolabi, Seoleng, all of these things are ongoing online as well, advocating for the use of mother tongue in education. And so there is also the development of some written instructional materials. Again, Seoleng has been active on this as well. There is a book that recently came out from the University Teaching Hospital at UI, Anatomy for Beginner. I'm aware of Dr. Kayode Fakilede's work, several books that he has published in this regard. Science Yoruba also has some ongoing work in this regard. Mathematics in Yoruba language by Akim Adeniyan, I'm aware, also has some ongoing work in this area. There may also be some other activities going on to develop materials, to develop instructional materials that I am not aware of, you know. But the question is, so far, how far have the existing solutions solved the two problems that I have identified? Remember that there are several problems, but I'm only focusing on two. And so my interest here is to see how far these several solutions that I have talked about, how far they have gone in addressing these two problems. Well, for lack of instructional materials, this is significantly insufficiently addressed. In fact, if tomorrow the government says, okay, let's go for it. Let's go and do mother tongue education. The problem is that we don't actually have the materials to use in these classrooms. I know, of course, that there are some materials that have been produced in the past, especially in the with Professor Babs Fafunwa and his colleagues' work, but those materials are not necessarily the curriculum of today. So what I am saying basically is that if tomorrow we want to start going in full force with mother tongue education, the problem is that we don't have the materials to actually use in those classes. And so that remains a significant problem. And so it has not really been solved or in any significant way right now, currently. The other one is lack of private catalytic pedagogical practices. What do I mean by this? Private catalytic pedagogical practices simply means a kind of pedagogical innovation, a kind of pedagogical intervention that has the potential to inspire our government to want to actually go into mother tongue education. And I'm going to give you an example of what that can look like. So this has been barely addressed. And in fact, I'm only aware of just one project that has actually done something in this regard. And I'm going to be talking about that. So what is the way forward then? How do we solve this problem? I have an idea, and that idea is what I have described as a community engaged approach to solving the problem of lack of instructional materials, lack of private catalytic pedagogical interventions, and so on and so forth. So the first question I wanted to address before moving forward is, what is community engagement? And what is the approach that is based on this? The Center for Disease Control in the US in 1997 has this definition for community engagement. It reads, community engagement is the process of working collaboratively with and through groups of interest or similar situations to address issues affecting the well-being of those people. It is a powerful vehicle. There are changes that will improve the health of the community and its members. It often involves partnership, coalitions that help. So I want us to pay attention to the fact that community engaged projects, community engaged activities has the potential to change the system of a society. Lots of people within that society are ready to move in that regard. And usually what happens is that this actually happens with communities of practices, communities of practice which actually come together on a particular thing, on a particular task in order to drive change. And so I want us to pay attention to that, to the power of community engagement. So now, how can we use this approach of community engagement to solve the problem of lack of instructional materials? Well, we can collaborate, that is, we can engage with other members of our community to translate current textbooks that are used at schools. There is an example of this that I wanted to mention, which is basically the Science in Yoruba project. And so what we did in this project basically was to collaborate. There was a collaboration between 5 graduate students. I myself, at that time, I was a graduate student, and I collaborated with 4 colleagues from University of Ibadan. And some of them are here. Samuel Jegede over here. This is me, and this is Babatola Yetayo, and this is Samuel Awelewa. This is one of the professors at the chemistry department at UI, and this is the HOD, the department at that time. And so we worked together, asked for volunteers, for about close to a year translating that textbook. And in the long run, we have the translation done. And the textbook was published by Learn Africa, which used to be Longman before. And so this example, shows that in fact we can pick, some textbooks in those schools and then translate them through collaboration. That will make it to be faster. It will make the translation to be done in a manner, in a quick time. So, however, I'm not actually aware of any other project that has done something close to this. Of course, instructional materials are being produced all the time. But what I'm saying is that the books that students are using currently at the schools, how many of them do we have translated? I'm not really aware of any that actually has been translated, which is actually based on the current curriculum. Okay, so there was a recent development where an individual produced Igbo physics. I'm not also sure that that is actually based on the current curriculum that students use at schools, meaning that would that kind of textbook be able to support students in their current in the topics that they actually teach them right now. I'm not sure about that. So, but another one issue that I actually wanted to mention is to actually learn from experience that even though we may want to pick a textbook, and in fact, that is the easiest way. Pick the textbook that students are already using, translate that, and then make that available in the market. But there is an issue. There is a problem with that. And that problem is that if anyone is thinking about doing this, they would need to secure independent translation permission before they begin. What I mean by this basically is that secure a permission that doesn't tie you to the publisher. So the problem that we ran into when we did this project was that at that time, we were so excited about the project, and with Learn Africa, we had this kind of agreement with them that, yeah, you are going to be the one to publish our translation when we are done. And so, and they were receptive to that. They invited us to their office. They gave us copies of their textbook. They were really, really excited at that time. And we were excited as well that they were excited. But the problem is that this manuscript was completed in 2020, and I delivered it at their office in Ikeja in 2020, right before COVID-19 started. Since then, we have not been able to move forward in the publication process. So I have been calling them. I visited their office. I have been, calling the publisher of this company. But the last time we talked, oh yeah, I'm going to call you back. I'm going to talk to you later. I have not seen any response since then. Initially, what they mentioned basically was that, oh yeah, it's because of COVID-19. The schools are closed, so we're not able to work on the manuscript. But after COVID-19 subsided, I have not heard anything from them. The problem is we cannot move forward with another publisher because of that agreement that, oh yeah, you're going to be the one to publish our translation, and because of, again, copyright. So if anyone is thinking about, going this route to create instructional materials, I would say that make sure to have a an independent translation permission from the publisher. Another thing that we could do actually is to develop the instructional materials from scratch. What this means basically is we create the content by ourselves. We don't use any other person's any existing textbook, but we produce the content based on the current curriculum, so that the students will be able to use that textbook right now in their classes if they are interested. So, but I'm not aware of any project that has actually successfully done this. So I'm not aware of any textbook, whether it is in the area of science, whether it is in the area of, so whether it is social, civic, and so on and so forth. I have not seen any project that has successfully done this. So again, what this means is that we don't have the infrastructure. And the problem is not the problem of the government alone. There are private citizens also have our own share of this, responsibility. So that is my view about what we can do to solve the problem of lack of instructional materials. The second one that I wanted to talk about is lack of private catalytic pedagogical practices. What I mean by this basically is some form of activities by private citizens that in the long run has the potential to inspire the government to want to do mother tongue education. Okay, and I wanted to also provide some examples here. So what we can do is that we can collaborate, we can engage with other members of our community to provide ad hoc complementary mother tongue instructions in nearby schools, in schools that are near to us, schools that are near our workplace or where we live. So we can do that. And I wanted to give an example of the Science in Yoruba project. I wanted to play this video briefly. I am not sure. I don't know if you would be able to hear. Maybe I need to stop sharing and reshare so that I can enable sound. So I'm doing that right now. So this is one of my colleagues, Eri Femufoluawo is his name. He was a master's graduate student. He was a graduate student in the chemistry department at UI in 2019 when we conducted this project. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So that was one of the recordings that we did at that time. And so how can we do ad hoc complementary mother tongue instructions at the schools within the official pedagogical framework that is sanctioned by the government, right? So the answer that I have is what we call the translanguaging pedagogy. So the question is, what is translanguaging itself? So translanguaging as a concept refers to the use of one's linguistic repertoire without regard for socially and politically defined language names and labels. So a translanguaging pedagogy then is one that encourages students to make use of their full linguistic repertoire in their construction of knowledge, with the assumption that we cannot separate our languaging from the way in which we perceive the world. So what this means basically, translanguaging is moving back and forth from one language to another, moving back and forth from one language to another. And you see that, in fact, today, most of us do it. When we talk to friends, when we talk to colleagues, you move from Yoruba to English. It's kind of like you are shuttling between these two languages. Other people do the same thing, from around the world. And so a translanguaging pedagogy then is one that encourages students to move from one language to another in a very flexible way. However, there are two kinds of translanguaging pedagogy. There is one that we refer to as spontaneous. Spontaneous meaning that conversations, instructions, conversations in classrooms happen any language at a time. So meaning that the student is free to use any language in order to construct the current knowledge. The teacher also can move from one language to another effortlessly, very freely in spontaneous translanguaging pedagogy. However, such a spontaneous translanguaging pedagogy cannot work for our context in Nigeria because of several factors. However, there is a second one which might work, which is planned translanguaging pedagogy, and in fact, which is what we used at the school. It is what you have just seen Erife Mofoluawo used in that particular classroom. So if you notice, Erife Mofoluawo did not say, àwọn ẹ̀yà ìmọ̀lára ní etí, ojú, and so on and so forth. He said sensory organ ní, and so on and so forth. That is planned translanguaging pedagogy. Planned in the sense that you plan which language is going to supply which concept, which language is going to function in which particular role, and which other language is going to function in another role. So the way we design this is to have what we call simultaneous translanguaging pedagogy, where the teacher uses common Yoruba expressions to explain technical stuff, and also uses English expressions to explain technical stuff. But in any of the explanations, the technical terms like sensory organs, like weight, like mass, like solar system, all of this remain in the English language. So the question then would be, why do we have to do planned translanguaging like that? Don't we say that we want to do mother tongue education? Some people might even watch this video and say, so you're doing mother tongue education, you're saying sensory organ, and you're saying all of these things. The reason basically is because of language of assessment. Currently in Nigeria, students are tested using the English language. So, and in fact, that is a GSS1 class that you have just seen. So in that classroom, the government mandates that classroom to be assessed using the English language. Now imagine what will happen if we go into that classroom and telling them àwọn ẹ̀yà ìmọ̀lára ní ojú, ẹnu, and so on and so forth. That would probably be a problem for the student, because they might mistakenly supply that particular term àwọn ẹ̀yà ìmọ̀lára when they are asked during exam, although they are going to be marked wrong by their teachers. So we had to use that planned translanguaging pedagogy in order to navigate this particular problem, especially. So that is why planned translanguaging pedagogy was important for our project. And what I am saying here is if any one of us is ready to do this kind of community engaged work, you can mobilize, especially maybe lecturers, professors, you can mobilize graduate students from your school, from any department, from chemistry, from physics, from the Yoruba department, from linguistics. Mobilize them, ask them, come, let us go and provide this kind of instruction at the schools, and also maybe train the teachers on how to use this method. It could be maybe once, twice in a month. It doesn't matter if it is consistent. If we are all doing it, you can imagine if UI, if there are professors at UI, at OAU, at FUNAB, at all our colleges, doing the same thing, going into local classrooms, and then providing this kind of ad hoc pedagogical interventions there, kind of like validating the experiences, um, validating the student experiences, validating their language. That can be so powerful. And I'm going to be talking about that in a very short time. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is, why is this approach important? Okay, why do we need to care about this community engaged approach? Well, for one thing, it will mean that we as citizens are, finally taking charge of our own destiny, meaning that we are not waiting for any government in order to, derive change. What we are doing basically is to derive change by initiating the process that would eventually result in change. So that can be one thing that we are trying to drive social change. Another thing, and I think this should actually give us some kind of how do you call it, satisfaction that we are actually doing we're doing a good, we are doing service to the students. Because when you go ahead and you talk to students in their language, you can see from that classroom that the few students that are actually listening to Erife are actually excited. You can see them smiling. You can see them raising their hands. When Erife has the same question in English, none of them was actually interested. None of them was responsive to that question. But when he began to use Yoruba, you see how excited they are. So self-confidence is what students will gain as a result. It will also increase participation, as we saw in that video, and it will also enhance their overall educational experience. So if that is actually what we achieve by going into the schools, I think that is satisfactory. I think that is something that is worth pursuing. So, but most importantly, the kind of the models that I have presented in terms of how we can produce pedagogical materials, in terms of how we can provide ad hoc pedagogical interventions at these schools, this actually might be the transition that we need from the English language to a full-scale mother tongue education in our communities. And why have I said this? It is because of experience. So when we were doing this project between 2017 and 2019, I frequently went to the Ministry of Education with my colleagues, of course, in Ibadan, the Oyo State Ministry of Education, just to notify them that we're actually doing these things at your schools. We want you to be aware. And what they told us then is, oh yeah, this is a very good project. We wonder how you are doing it at the schools. Okay, we are going to invite you to the ministry. We would invite about 3 schools from around Ibadan and ask them to come to the ministry. And then we would like to see how you actually do it in action. And maybe we can extend your model to other schools. Unfortunately, that invitation did not come till I left Nigeria back to New Orleans to continue my graduate education there. And so since then, I have not been in Nigeria, and my hope is that the next time that I'm in Nigeria, I will go back there, because that tells me something, that there is something there, that the government might actually be interested in these kind of things. It seems like we just need to give them a template. We just need to give them some kind of practice that they can see so that maybe they will say, oh yeah, let's actually start small. Maybe let us start with this translanguaging model that you are using, which encourages the use of not only English but also the Yoruba language. So what I'm saying is that this community engaged approach might be the transition that we need to move from an English only instructional practices in our schools and to a full scale mother tongue education that is entirely in our language. So to conclude, I have identified some commendable efforts that are ongoing by private citizens to actualize MTE. I've mentioned the amazing work being done by Professor Kola Olabi, the likes of Dr. Kayode Fakinlade, Seoleng, what we are currently doing, thanks to Professor Sinawa, and several other things that, several other kind of solutions that people are already engaging in. However, these efforts have not solved the two important problems that I mentioned in this talk. The first one is lack of instructional materials. The second one is lack of private catalytic pedagogical practices. And my conclusion is that a community-engaged approach that mobilizes community members to create instructional materials and provide complementary translanguaging instructions in nearby schools seem like a possible way forward. And I will be happy to know what people think. Thank you so much for listening to me today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Taofeek, for that excellent presentation. And all right, thank you very much.